Don't be a card-carrying member of the cult of average. Okay, in this video, we'll be talking about 2022 house price predictions. And I know so many of you think that you've missed the boat. You know, there's so much noise in this time of year, different people, different institutions, different banks predicting what house prices will do. You know, it becomes very confusing, but I really want you to imbibe this principle. Don't be a card-carrying member of the cult of average. There is still money to be made, and in this video we'll be describing how, where, and when you can make that in the real estate market. So if you want to invest, you're still not sure whether this is the right time, whether you've missed the boat, this video will bring you a bunch of value. My name's PK and I help people build passive income through property investing using data without using a $15,000 buyer's agent every single time. And you know, I'm excited about sharing ideas, and if you want to absorb idea-orientated property investing content, then this channel is where I strive to do it. So hit subscribe, turn the notification bell on, and give it a thumbs up. I really value each and every thumbs up. So let's get into it. You can already see your eyes are probably already going to the screen in front of you. Now, what you're seeing here is SQM Research, their predictions for calendar year 22 housing prices. Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, here's one set of predictions, PK, but what about the one set to light by CBA or by Westpac or ANZ or that person and this person and everything. You know, there's so much noise. Everyone's an expert. The reason I wanted to share these predictions is because Louis Christopher, the owner of SQM Research, tells it as it is. I'm not affiliated with him in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I find their free information to be rather lacking in terms of data. I think there are better sources of information, but nonetheless, they produce these predictions every year. And if you actually go back, you know, for those of us who are interested, like 20 years of property data and predictions, see who's been the most right, who's been the most wrong. SQM have been the most right, you know, out of anyone. You know, they've predicted the 2013 to 2017 boom. They also predicted when that would end. When everyone was crying a river just after the GFC, they predicted the house prices would actually go up, which almost no one did. Late last year, they also predicted house prices would go up, which they did. And I just want to juxtapose that versus CBA and all these other banks who, look, think about it. They are always negative on house prices. Why is it? Because one of the reasons is a political innuendo, right? If they come out and say that house prices are going to boom forever, then what do you think APRA is going to do, right? APRA, the Prudential Regulatory Authority, they're going to say, well, that's going to put, you know, some weakness in our banking system. Let's come in and restrict borrowing. Let's come in and cool the housing market. So what these banks do is incredibly intelligent. They produce reports, they produce predictions that help their own cause. Remember, the number one way any bank makes money is through deposits and loans, right? They want to issue mortgages because that's how they make money. That's how they get that interest. Interest revenues are the biggest on any bank's P&L statement. I know I used to work at JP Morgan. This is a reality. So what I do is I just completely ignore all bank forecasts. You know, if you track them over the last 10 years, they've never been right. You can do this for yourself. Maybe I'll do a video on this proving it. They've never been right. Whereas this, what you see right here in front of you, I'm sure you're already going through the columns and rows. I'm not going to go through it individually, but take out some key takeaways. This has been more right than wrong. Okay, it's very important that you guys understand that. Ignore the clickbait. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, PK, he's got a course. He's trying to spruik the housing market yet again because he's got an agenda. I'm going to be honest. I do have an agenda. I want to make money, right? That is true, like anyone. But these are the facts. And I don't really care whether you use me to advance your property investing, whether you use a buyer's agent, although you don't really need to, whether you do it yourself. In fact, try do it yourself first. That's the free option. You know, like, I don't really care. These are just facts. These are my genuine insights. These are my genuine predictions of what will happen. So the takeaways I want to say here, this is actual. So you can see the property market has, you know, clearly in calendar year 21 gone berserk, right? But what I want to demonstrate, or what I want to say here right now, is people think that just after a price boom, prices bust. Okay, just after a price boom, prices bust. What they don't know and what people don't really fully understand is that since 1987, there's only been three housing market corrections in Australia, right? Only three, okay? 2008, 2011, and 2018. And all three of them have been corrections between 4 and 5%. Prices have come down between 4 and 5%. This is in the last like 30 years. And in the last 30 years, we've had huge booms as well, right? So, don't follow the clickbait media articles, what your friends and family tell you. Don't be a card-carrying member of the cult of average. Just because this column clearly shows that housing market has boomed this year, 2021, that doesn't mean it's not going to boom next year. So what SQM is saying, this is their base case scenario, right? And then their most optimistic scenario is scenario number 3. Their most negative scenario is scenario number 4. And their kind of middle ground scenario is scenario number 2. Okay, so most negative 4, most optimistic 3, base and 2 are kind of in the middle ground. So it's best to kind of go by the middle ground because, let's just be conservative, right? And what they've said, which, the banks hardly ever do, is they've actually given us parameters. So cash rate remains unchanged, quantitative easing scaled back, headline inflation 3 to 5%, further APRA reductions by June 2022. And these other scenarios, you can read this yourself, they simply kind of pivot on that. So if you don't believe that the cash rate will remain unchanged, then go to, another scenario. Okay, well, we reckon that second half cash rate rises to, by 25 basis points to 50 basis points. You can, these underlying fundamentals, underlying assumptions, you can tweak for yourself, right? Quantitative easing scaled back, headline inflation. Everyone's got a view on inflation these days. I just did a video on that and how it hasn't really impacted housing markets historically. But here it is for yourself. Headline inflation 3 to 5%. You can see that in other versions, like this very negative version, it's 4 to 6%. And further APRA action. They've just announced a month ago that they're clamping down on borrowing very slightly. If that increases, then there will be repercussions. But here are they already built in, further APRA interventions, etc., etc. So I would just want to go with the base case for the purposes of this video. And you can see yourself here, right? The table's in front of you. But the key thing that I want to demonstrate is for Perth, it's positive. 0.3 to 3% to 7%. Brisbane is positive. Darwin, it's negative. Who's investing in Darwin anyway? Melbourne, negative to positive. Sydney, negative to positive. Adelaide, positive 4 to positive 8. Hobart, negative 3 to 2%. Canberra, plus 5% to plus 9%. And the overall weighted capital city average, 0% to 5%. So even if you're not very into analytics, if you just look at this bottom number right here, you would say that the Australian housing market, base case scenario, not the most optimistic, all right? Base case scenario, prices are not going backwards, all right? And immediately what that tells you is that even if you think you've missed the boat, actually you're going to miss an even bigger boat by not acting right now. Now, let's come back to Sydney, Melbourne. Now, I know that most of my audience, you guys, you're from Sydney, you're from Melbourne, all right? And what you're thinking is, I can't invest in Sydney anymore. Prices have gone up almost 30%. Therefore, I can't invest in property. I just want to encourage you that right now, as I've demonstrated in multiple videos, Sydney's on the cusp of a bubble, right? And it's probably not the best place to invest, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't invest. No, check it out. I'm not saying to invest in a place like Darwin, but Brisbane, just check that forecast out. Perth, check that forecast out. Adelaide, check that. If you've been watching me for at least a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you know that I've been harping on about Perth, Brisbane, Adelaide from a million, multi-dimensional angles or different views, different ways of analyzing the property market. And in any way that you think about property, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth stand out head and shoulders above other capital cities. Now, you might say, why not Hobart? Well, it's already grown far more than any capital city in the last 5 years, including Sydney. Okay, so you don't want to buy at the top. Canberra, huge land tax, so it's not for everyone, only for those who are potentially quite wealthy. And so you might say, well, what about Melbourne? Melbourne City, biggest cities, biggest job prospects, all that. Quite frankly, crap. The job prospects in of themselves don't drive property markets. Just look at Melbourne. I mean, Melbourne's the biggest capital city, everything like that. Same with Sydney, but Hobart has outperformed Sydney in the last 30 years in terms of capital growth. So you just need to look at the data to actually understand what drives it, right? But let's come back to Melbourne. If you have $500,000 to spend, $400,000 to spend, all you can get in Melbourne is somewhere in Western Melbourne. That's going to be an area with like Tarneed or something like that with very high vacancy rates where I wouldn't recommend buying. Or you'd be looking out towards Melton with oodles of land supply. I know lots of property investment companies are urging you to get those depreciation benefits and everything like that in Melbourne, house and land packages, northwest. It's just not a good idea, right? It's not going to be positive cash flow and the growth is going to be substandard, right? So just because you've got money doesn't mean that you need to put it in Sydney and Melbourne. You can't get anything under 500K in Melbourne. You don't need to spend $700,000, $900,000 to buy a high performance property. You can do that in Brisbane for under 500K. You can do that in Perth for under 500K. You can do that in Adelaide for 500K and get positive cash flow. And you can see just happenstantially that these are the cities, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide, tipped to be the best. Okay, and even if you say, PK, these forecasts are bogus, I don't care about them, I don't trust the person who's producing them, the SQM research guys, I have no time in the world for them. Even if you think that they are wrong, let's just check this out. I mean, let's take Brisbane, 8% to 14%. Let's just take the bottom end, 8%. If you buy a property for $400,000 today, let's say in Brisbane, $400,000. Let's say it grows by 8%. That's almost $40,000 of growth, all right? It's 36 or something like that. That type of growth, is it better to get that growth or not get that growth? All right, even if it's at the lower end of these predictions, if you have money in the bank, which I know you do, because everyone does, savings rates are through the roof, why not invest it in property? Like, why not? And remember, the cash on cash return is way more than 8%. To buy a $400,000 property in Brisbane, let's say you need $80,000. I've just demonstrated that you get, almost $40,000 of capital growth in that first year. 40,000 as a proportion of 80,000, 50% cash on cash return. You can't get that in the stock market unless you're taking huge leverage, which is highly risky in the stock market. So think about those cash on cash returns. I'm not trying to spruik things. This is just mathematics, right? This is how wealth is made. Don't be a card carrying member of the cult of average. And the second takeaway I want to sort of demonstrate from this table is, Brisbane, let's say 8% to 14% growth next year. That is the average. To get, let's say, 8% growth, there needs to be suburbs that grow by 10%, 15%, 20%, maybe even 25%. And there will also be suburbs that grow by 6%, 5%, 4%, 2%, 0%, maybe even negative, right? This is an average. An average, by definition, is the average of various data sets or data points. And so if you use science, if you use data, true data, like I've talked about in so many videos and obviously my clients learn, then you can get those suburbs that will grow 20% despite Brisbane only growing by 8%. You can get those suburbs that grow by 15% despite Brisbane only growing by 8%. That's the power in knowledge. That's the power of data which anyone can learn. All right, so even if you suspect that these predictions are wrong, which of course they're not going to be fully accurate 100% of the time, or even 50% of the time, there are markets within markets that outperform. But you can see the general gist of whether it's this or many other predictions of those who are actually reputable, is that property market is still going north in 2022. So the takeaway from this video is, I know that you think you've missed the boat. Okay, and I know that you're probably seeing your colleagues, friends, family, having made money in 2021. You're thinking, these guys think they're so smart, but I'm just going to wait for this property market to correct. I'm just going to wait for interest rates to go up. I'm just going to wait for, all this house of cards to come crashing down, and then we'll see who's laughing, right? I mean, I can empathize why many of you might think like that. The reality is, that ain't happening. The train is just going, all right? Whether you're on the train or you're off the train, I really encourage you, and I used to tell this to myself, put aside your ego. Just because you haven't made money in 2021, because you're not been in the game, it doesn't mean that you need to defend your position. put aside your ego, look at the data. Don't just listen to me like I'm just some random person right on YouTube. Like, listen to so many people. Anyone who knows what they're doing is suggesting that the market is not going to grow as fast as 2021, but it will still grow in 2022. And of course, markets within markets, you can still make huge capital growth, huge positive cash flow. I hope I'm not sounding like a broken record. I'm really like, I don't care if you do my course or not, but invest in the market because you'll really advance your wealth. This boom is just starting. You know, for your famous last words, you're probably thinking, well, I can really tell you from, I just read a report in the RBA, which is probably going to be my next video on how housing debt, yes, is increasing, but wealth and offset accounts and redraw accounts and the proportion of people paying down their loans is increasing at a faster rate, a disproportionately higher rate than the rate at which household debt is increasing, right? All these things, you analyze housing markets not just from one myopic, narrow tunnel vision, but from 20, 30, 50 different angles, scientifically, econometrically, financially, and you understand what's really going on. And that's what the truly intelligent, wealthy people are doing. I'm not going to say I'm truly intelligent or I'm truly wealthy, but I try to analyze it from multiple angles of vision. And my conclusion is that you should invest now. Okay, guys, so hopefully you got value. If you did, hit the subscribe button, turn notification bell on, and give it a like. Please give it a like, and that way more people can see this, and we can create a bit of a debate. I don't care if you disagree with me. You're more than welcome to disagree with me, but let's create a debate based on data, not just flippant comments that, interest rates are rising, debt is rising, therefore there's going to be a housing correction. There's been umpteenth examples globally in Australia as well, where that's simply not the case. True wealth is not made by looking at service level data. True wealth is made by just looking under the hood, going a few layers deeper. Otherwise, if it was easy and you could just follow the media headlines and believe what CBA is saying, that the housing market will crash in a couple of years, that's how the inequality increases. That's how, unfortunately, the poor become poorer and poorer because it's just clickbait. It's tragic. Anyway, this has become a bit of a rant, but I'll leave links below to my podcast, to the Facebook group where we have these discussions, and of course to my website. But I wish you guys all the very best. In the next video, I'll be going 2 levels deeper. Catch you later. Bye.